Welcome to another Rising Tide Talk, the first one of 2025. I know it's about a month and a half in, but here we are. I've missed doing this, so I'm happy we're back at it to talk about games and the TTRPG space together. Joining me today to talk about being a vendor at a con is Clay Powell, also known as Kenku Court. Clay is responsible for kenkucourt.com, where he sells all kinds of great TTRPG wares, including dice. He's a writer, game designer, and an organizer of very many things at various conventions, D&D events, TTRPG events. So please join me in welcoming Clay. Clay, why don't you say hello?
Hello, everybody. That was a very nice intro. Made sure to include just about everything, which is that last word is how I would describe what I do. Pretty accurate. Anything I can get my mitts on.
Awesome. Love it. Yeah. I feel like the TTRPG community, we generally tend to be hoarders of things. So maybe I should speak for myself. I know I'm a hoarder of things. So cool dice or cool like TTRPG paraphernalia, always a big fan. But today we're here to talk about being the vendors, being the people at the conventions selling all of these awesome wares. So today, Clay, we're going to be covering all things related to conventions and being a vendor. And for those of you here today live, we're going to cover kind of three main themes: things to do before the con, getting ready for the con, things to do during the con, and then, of course, some stuff to think about when we're done and we're back home. If you have your own questions that don't get addressed in today's conversation, I'm going to try to keep about 15 minutes or so at the end of the discussion for you to ask your questions live, and then we'll transfer them over to Clay and see what his thoughts are on that. Clay, how you doing over there? You ready to get started?
I'm ready to get started. I'm going to try to talk fast and clear today because I've got a lot to say, and I want people to at least get one piece of advice that they need out of this.
Yeah, I'm sure there'll be at least one or two good nuggets out of this because there's some really good questions here. So why don't we get started?
Let's go.
So let's say, you're here, you're listening, you're part of the TTRPG community, and you don't know if you're ready to be a vendor. When do you know if you're ready to sign up to be a vendor at a con?
Yeah, so this is a very common question, very understandable. It's important to know. It's the first step. I'll first give you the answer that basically everyone will give you that I do agree with, and then I'll give something a little bit more functional. So the answer everyone is going to give you is you will never know when you're ready, and you will always be ready. There is not going to be a perfect time to start, and you are never going to have everything that you would have needed in the first time. Pretty much, I've been doing this for years, and I don't think I can name a con where I actually prepared everything I needed properly or had enough time or stuff didn't go wrong. So as long as you have stuff that you want to sell that is related to the convention, you should sign up. And, worst comes to worst, you're not ready and they don't approve you to table there. Now, more functional answer. I like to tell people if you have 3 items or products that you can use to fill a 3-foot by 3-foot cube, that is all you need as a just like, here's a rule to follow. The reason I say that, I'll go into a little bit more later on like how I understand kind of guiding people into looking at your stuff. But generally, rules of 3, 3 things to look at is good psychologically. And on top of that, it leads into some of the other advice, which is you should usually start by buddying with someone, not doing your own table.
Yeah, no, I like that. Having a quantifiable metric is always helpful. I know, having that threshold, 3 items to sell is a really good thing to keep in mind, I think. You talked a little about having a buddy system going on. Why don't we jump to that question? Asking for help, who should you get to help behind the booth? How do you kind of go about that? What could a buddy in this context look like?
So for me personally, it was just a matter of I had a friend who had been doing art as their career for a while, and I would help with occasional little weekend markets. And I would show up, and just because they needed some help, I would be the buddy in this instance. And over time, I helped out enough that I felt confident doing my own thing, and they then gave me a portion of their table at a larger convention that I could use. And it was literally like a foot out of a 10 by 10 booth. It's a tiny little space, but it was enough to get going because there was no way I could fill a 10 by 10 or even a 5 by 5 foot booth at this convention. It's huge. But having that little section, it gives you the opportunity to not look like you are missing a bunch of items. And also it's a win. If you sell 1 foot by 1 foot worth of product, that's a big win. You've cleared your table space. So yeah, in general, if you can find either someone that you know fairly well who you could tag along and take a small part of their table and pay for a small percentage of the cost of the table, or if you have someone who's kind of on the same level as you, you're both going for the first time, then you can split a small time convention table. You know, each of you get 3 feet of a 6 foot table at an artist alley and kind of go from there.
Awesome. Cool, cool. And speaking of these buddies, and maybe we'll get to this further down the road, Clay, but out of curiosity, what do you like pay the person helping you, or how do you go about that exchange? Is it kind of like this idea of, hey, I'll like support you at your table in your sales if I can have part of this table to sell my stuff too, or like how do you go about trading that with somebody?
It's going to range a lot. You know, if you are two people who do thousands of dollars of sales at every convention, it's going to be very different from two people trying to, you know, get their feet under them. I've had a range of things. It's been the case where I just have to, you know, help carry stuff from the car to the table, and they'll give me that little piece of their booth early on in my career. But then it's gone as far as when I've organized, you know, tabletop and D&D play at conventions where I have to get 6 DMs and 3 booth helpers and stuff out. And, you know, it's about finding people who are roughly in the same stage or the same level as you are. That way you have the same understanding, because you're not going to be able to kind of reach up, find someone who's doing much better than you and say like, hey, can I essentially leech off of you a little bit?
Hmm.
But if you're at the same level, you're leeching off each other becomes mutually beneficial. You're actually both gaining, versus sometimes you don't have anything that the person above you could actually gain. So it's about making sure that whatever the way that you pay or compensate, that it's something that people are happy with. So sometimes it's as simple as, hey, I'll reach out to 3 of my buddies and be like, do you want to go to this convention? I will pay for, you know, I'll get your ticket covered and I will pay for the Airbnb if you just help me 4 hours each day. And then you can use the rest of the time to go do your own thing and then have fun at the convention. Generally, you know, it's going to be people that you know that you're going to have the best chances of getting help from. So you should be able to have a good read on like what they would actually be happy with.
Cool. Yeah, I like that. Kind of like a symbiotic relationship between between the people at the table. That's great.
Exactly. And I should mention as well, for things like the actual play experience, that's something where I negotiated with the convention owners and got a budget to then pay the dungeon masters with, which, as far as I understand, is rare and kind of hard to make happen. But generally, you know, the more that being the person kind of highest up on the totem pole in that operation, I'm going to do my best to find where the money is and get it to them. That isn't just, you know, give a percent of your sales, because that doesn't always make sense.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. And hey, it doesn't hurt to ask the con organizers, right? Especially if it's something in your community or whatnot.
Exactly.
That kind of leads me to my next question about where should people go when they're looking to start doing this? Being a vendor at a con. I imagine there's certainly an equation in your mind of, do I go to Gen Con or do I go to my small local artist alley in the basement of the hotel? Or what's the equation there? How do you decide where to start and which conventions should be the ones where you break the ice with?
I'll start out flat out. Don't try to do Gen Con as your first one. I haven't even made it to Gen Con. They're not going to accept you if it's your first time. So I wouldn't get your hopes up there. Generally, you know, when I started, it was literally a comic book coffee shop's like local nerd market that they did once a month. And then I would just go, and it was like, you know, a $30 table, and you have to bring all your own tents and stuff. But yeah, it's on the sidewalk in a semi-busy area. You're there for 6 hours and then you go home. And it's great because, you know, if it's a $30 to $50 table fee, for most businesses, that's like 2 sales to break even. At least hopefully, you know, you may only be doing stickers where you have to sell a little bit more, but either way, like $50 is not a hard goal to hit. For many people, there might not be enough of an economy in their local area to have those little markets, but that's where you just start kind of reaching out to, you know, the county level, kind of within your state. As much as possible, try to find the things that are the closest to you. You don't want to have to fly to your first convention. That's not going to be a good experience for you, I don't think. For us, it was literally a 15-minute drive was like our first one. And I'm very lucky that I'm in San Diego, so I'm 45 minutes away from TwitchCon, which I've been at. So things like that. And if you then find success, like we did at TwitchCon, when they went to Vegas one year, we were like, it's worth it to drive to Vegas for this. But if they'd gone a little farther, it might not have been worth it. Yeah, generally, it's as much as possible. The simplest, cheapest option that's closest to you is where you should start.
Okay, that's a really great answer. I suppose that you covered this already a little bit, but when you're looking at the cost, other than renting the table, what are some of the other costs that people should be kind of thinking of before they sign up to do something like this?
Yeah, so table cost is obviously the first step, like you mentioned. Generally, if someone needs a hard and fast rule for like getting prepared for this convention or seeing if you can afford it, I say bring twice as much as the break even point, adding in table cost, like the production and labor costs of whatever it is you're selling, and then like if there's travel or hotel costs involved. So take that number, double it, and bring that much amount of goods to sell. That way, you're not bringing so little that you can't break even, but you're not bringing so much that you have to then lug it all back with you.
Mhm.
But yeah, generally, like if you can cover travel, food, and the table, that's generally going to be the bulk of the cost.
Cool. I think that covers our first pillar as far as before the convention. Maybe we'll transition into things to think about when you're at the convention. And I'm sure, there's a little bit of overlap here. There's some of the stuff that you could do before in preparation and whatnot. But broadly speaking, now we're at the convention. We've got our booth, or we've got our space for our booth. I'd love to kind of learn a little bit about what you do to set your booth up in order to attract people to stop at your booth. Things that you might be able to do to kind of lay it out. Maybe there's peripherals that you bring to kind of encourage people to stop and look and things like that.
Yeah, definitely. So first off, even though this stuff is used at the convention, you better be thinking about it before. So that's step one. For me, I think I'll first start with how to get people to look. This is another one where there is an answer that most people will give you, which is verticality. That is one of the absolute most important things you can do. When you're at a convention, everyone is given a table at the same height. Usually it's pretty low. If it's a very nice convention, they might give you some sort of backing shelf or wall or something, but often not. So everything is at the same kind of low level. So when people are scanning, whatever is sticking out from above that is the first thing you'll see, especially if it's, a big colorful banner or a shelf that has like there's the companies that do the like gummy dice. They'll have a huge rack that's super tall with all the colorful packs of dice. People go, oh, that's dice. Then they read it. They go, oh, that's gummies. Even cooler now when I go check it out. And you could do that from the crowd. You don't have to actually be in the booth or at the booth to figure that out. And that's a big part of why verticality matters. There's a video I tried to find. I couldn't find it. I wanted to be able to link it for y'all, but to summarize it, there was a game company, a video game company, who brought their demo to a convention. And they made a video where they put a camera and they had little trackers on people's heads of how long they will look at your booth before moving on. And the average was like 2.5 seconds. It's a tiny, brief window. So then they showed how they took advantage of those 2.5 seconds. And the biggest one was there's people playing the demo in the booth and then a big TV on the top outside of the booth showing the gameplay of the person playing. And that's one immediate way is to go, oh, I don't have to walk in to see what's happening and to gauge whether I would like to do it. But then two, they added a system where if the person playing like beat the tutorial or whatever the fight was while you were watching, everyone in the crowd got a prize. Now that's a little bit more of like you're gonna have to put a cost in there, obviously, but that idea of I want to look, I've decided that I'm interested, oh, and I'm rewarded for staying. Those are all kind of concepts that there's a lot of creative ways to create. Crowds draw crowds is a very common statement in this space, and it's just straight up true. Partially because no one wants to be the only person doing something, kind of in all parts of life. But then two, people can overhear crowds having fun and want to have fun in the same way. Whether that's for me, I do mystery bags and I've got little for the dice and I've got little bits involved and kind of make a game out of it where there's like a 1 in 5 chance of a magic or a curse set of dice in certain bags. And so I'm very intentionally, as people are opening their dice, which I've got dice trays to dump out, so they're enjoying it at the booth. And if they don't get the curse, I say, you've avoided the curse, and like really make a show out of it. Then people are going, what curse is at this convention? Then let me go check that out. So anything that you can do to just kind of broadcast, hey, you'll have fun if you walk up to my table. The opposite of that verticality and the fun being You know, when you go to the grocery store and there is a charity table outside, or even like Girl Scout cookies, most people are going and trying to walk past because they don't want to do that. And even if you have the coolest books and supplements and stuff on your table, if all they see is a table with papers and books on it, they're going to come to mind that charity thing and not want to come talk to you. So that's why you want to kind of show I have dice on my booth, not because I want to sell dice, but because I want to sell my other stuff. But people recognize the dice, will come look and play with it, and then kind of fan out from there.
Yeah, I like that. It kind of creates like this hook, right? It lures them in, gets them paying attention to what's at the booth. I think that's fantastic. I didn't mean to interrupt you though, Clay. Did you have other stuff to add?
Oh, you're all good. I'm looking at my notes to make sure I don't miss anything important. Like I said, like vertical things, so shelves, hanging things from like people will do PVC frames and hang like prints from off of it. Anything to get things up high. Lighting is also surprisingly important. Most places will either be in a decently lit spot, or if it's a very nice convention, may provide some lighting, but you could always use more, pretty much no matter what. For me, the two most effective ways of lighting my booth has been if you have any way to get a broad overhead light shining kind of towards you, so it's not going into the customer's faces, and that can light up the general area, that's really good. But a much easier practical solution is those little desk lamps with the movable arms. Those are really good because then, again, engaging people, you can see someone pick it up, like the jar of fancy dice, and go, hey, if you hold it right here under the light, you'll see it sparkle and it looks really great. And now they're interacting with you and with the dice, seeing it in a better light, and they're actually like doing the work of making it more appealing for you. Which is why those desk lamps are so good, is like directing them to say like, hey, you can make the experience better for yourself.
Yeah, that's really cool. And yeah, I think the lighting kind of comes to create this other element of like dynamism in the booth. So that's really cool. You talked a little bit about how this video game company was kind of giving out prizes to people. We did get a question from Glenn Watkins, and actually we got quite a few questions from Glenn. So I'm gonna steal from your ideas, Glenn, and and use them in our conversation today. But yeah, Glenn basically asks if it's worth running a giveaway. And I think especially in the context of somebody who's new to this, who's maybe going to their, first or third convention as a vendor, to what degree is a giveaway worth doing, and kind of what are the pros and cons that you can think of, Clay?
So I think in my experience, I've messed with that formula quite a bit. A traditional giveaway where it's just like put in your name and we'll do a drawing is not super effective unless it's like maybe if Intel was doing that at their big show floor booth, that might be one thing. But a small creator, it's hard to find something that you are willing to give away that people are willing to take the time to get, especially with that delayed gratification.
Mm-hmm.
The version of this that works the best for me, and this has been the way that in the last year I got like 850 in-person signups for our Kickstarter pre-launch page, is I had my little brother build me a 3D modeled gachapon machine that dice fit into. And little cheap gumball machines exist, and there's versions of this. You don't actually need the machine. But what I would do is I would just fill it with dice, and instead of saying with a big sign of here's how you get the dice, I would just say, ask me about a free D20. And I kid you not, 90% of people who got that D20 specifically said, I am asking you about the free D20. They are following the exact direction that I put on there because they're now intrigued. They've been given an easy instruction to follow that will then answer the question I know they have. And basically the pitch was, if you put in your email to the Kickstarter campaign, just so we can tell you when it launches, you get a free D20. And people like the physicality of getting to push the button and finding out what color they get, doing it with their friends. And people would literally sit there for 15 minutes in bad Wi-Fi trying to sign up for Kickstarter to do this. And like it would be people who don't even play. People just like free stuff, especially when it's like this little machine that they immediately get something out of, and there's a mystery element. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier, which is like memorable booths are generally going to fall into huge and impressive or like fun and personal. And so mine is this fun, personal, interactive thing where I'm basically trying to make as much of my booth a game as much as it is a selling platform. And people then have fun and they want to come back and buy more mystery bags and bring their friends and stuff because they got an experience and not just a product.
Yeah, that's really cool. I really like that. Or even like I remember the last convention I went to, there was kind of this giant dice tower that you could throw something down and depending on the outcome of your result, you immediately got a coupon. You know, like you immediately got either 10, 15, 20% off of your purchase. Or, you know, if you rolled really, really well, you got like a free, I forget what it was. I think it was a free die or a free, like a dice bag. So anyway, I'm not trying to say that people listening here should be giving away free dice bags to everybody who walks along, but
Right, right.
I agree with you wholeheartedly that making it an interactive experience, it's going to kind of like compound, right? That person's going to have a good time, and then other people are going to see them have a good time, and it kind of creates this crowd around the booth, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, no, it just kind of keeps bleeding into good things.
Exactly.
I could see that as an interesting way to get people's email addresses too, for like a newsletter or whatever. And that's another one of Glenn's questions. Outside of doing kind of like the gotcha machine, is there other ways that you can think of as being engaging ways to capture someone's email address? Or if you don't want to go the route of having freebies, should you be asking for email addresses? What kind of success do you expect to get? You know, just asking people on checkout rather, hey, can I get your email address? I don't know. I feel like that's not going to work too well, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
I would imagine it's not going to work super well. There's ways to kind of play with it a little bit, but you have to, they have to have some benefit because we all know how big spam inboxes get or the promotions tab and the updates tab. Like, you know, you don't really want to give your email out in general. Like, I don't even want to, and I ask hundreds of people to do so. So, in general, they have to feel like they're getting something out of it. I know that a lot of tabletop shops that'll do booths at conventions, they'll do something where if you buy a book, they'll say like email this email with your receipt and we will send you the PDF version as well. And technically they could have just set up a website where you put in the code and it gives it to you, but that system gets your email in exchange for the PDF. And you already bought it, you already have the book, there's no forcible way that you have to do this. But if you just want the convenience of the PDF as well, it's about an equivalent exchange of giving your email to download this file. So there's things like that, things as simple as I will, in my mystery bags, I just put my business card inside every bag. So if they want to reach out, that takes them to my email with my links page. If they're looking for my Kickstarter, they'll find it there. If they're just looking for my email to ask me a question, they'll find it there. But yeah, like them getting home, opening the bag again and seeing the card again and remembering my booth, that gets a kind of trickle down of I'll get a couple more sales after conventions and that sort of thing. But yeah, in general, because being on an email list is kind of I don't want to say it's an annoying thing, but they're kind of giving to you by joining your email list, in my opinion. They're giving you the chance to make more money off of them. So you really should be rewarding that if you expect people to do it.
Yeah, I can only speak for myself, but very rarely do I give people my email these days because it's already filled with all kinds of stuff. So, a 15% off is not going to be enough to convince me anyway. So it might not be enough to convince your audience.
Yeah.
Awesome. That's pretty interesting stuff. I hadn't considered the PDF thing. That's clever. That's clever. We talked a little bit about shelving and lighting and stuff. Is there other kinds of decor that you think people should think about, when they get the booth, when they buy the table? I presume it doesn't come with stuff like, I don't know, a tablecloth or are there other things like I want to say like practical things that people looking to be vendors should think about bringing with them?
Yeah. So one, they will usually give you a table. It'll even slightly less likely usually have a tablecloth. They'll almost always give you two chairs. They might give you a small backdrop, but past that, like you shouldn't expect anything. For me, I have some medical issues. That means that I always bring my own chair. It's just a slightly nice, folding chair. It's not like I'm bringing a gaming computer chair, but having a little fold up thing that I just keep in my con setup. That way, if it happens to be that the chairs that they give you suck, I have my own that's slightly less bad. So things like that are big. One thing that took me too long to start doing, so I'm gonna put y'all on game. Get shelving just for your inventory, not just the stuff on the table. So if you
Ooh.
can I get these little off of just like Amazon, these plastic like collapsible bins that have like a pull-out drawer, and I just get like six of those. They fold up into a box that's easy to carry in one load, and then it opens up to be like an entire station underneath the table, hidden by the tablecloth, where you can pull and continue to you can put your money box in there to have quick access. You can have the spare dice jars or whatever you're selling. So as soon as one sells, you can put the same one back out. That has saved me a lot of time digging through your cardboard boxes that inevitably get the wrong labels onto them and stuff. It's no good. So just having a system of here's my $50 worth of folding shelves. The dice always go in this one. The dice trays always go in that one. That sort of thing is really helpful. That's more like logistical. As far as getting people to come to your booth, having the equivalent of a mascot is something that works for a lot of people. It's becoming more and more popular to do like a big cardboard standee. So like artists will draw a character. It may be their mascot. It may be just some character that's in their art, and having that where people can take pictures of it. My partner who does art, she does a lot of Pokemon fan art. And so she's kind of notorious for doing the VAP jail, where she gets these little metal, almost jail bar looking like shelves, and she fills it with like 30 Vaporeon plushes, because that's her mascot in the Pokemon community. And it'll just have like lists of crimes they committed and things like that, which has nothing to do with selling your art, but it gets people to stop and laugh and remember the booth and associate Vaporeon with this booth and things like that. Even things as small as I have a little like crow that holds a light bulb, that the light bulb unfortunately no longer works, but with my mascot being a crow, that sort of thing. And then finally, the simplest level is printed table throws and banners. You can get these surprisingly cheap, even the like nice fitted stretchy ones, bright colors, your logo on it. You'll get it fitted to the standard kind of folding table size, and that will last you for years. I've gotten more compliments on that than almost anything else.
Wow.
I have this bright orange table throw, then I have these bright orange jackets that match for anyone who's working at the booth. And orange is generally an avoided color in advertising. It seems to not work for most people, but that ends up making me the only orange booth at the convention. And anyone that's looking for me, if they meet me somewhere else, I'll say, just find the orange table, I will be there. And that sort of like simple line of being memorable it goes a long way.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds really cool. And it's nice to have the mascot. I've been noticing that a lot, actually. A lot of big and small publishing houses in the TTRPG space seem to have this tendency to kind of put like a cute, marketable character in their content to be the mascot of that particular system or what have you. So definitely.
Exactly. Yeah, it just works. And we've learned in our recent advertising for our Kickstarter, ads that have a character in them just perform better. People, the context of a character they can view the rest of the scene through is so weirdly important. You would not think that we're all as gullible as, oh, I see a little frog guy, so now I like this art better. But that's just how it works. If you put the little frog guy on there, people are going to look at it a lot longer than if you have no one on there.
Mhm.
So yeah, things like that, and it can be as simple as you just have a character in the logo. You don't have to have a plush or a standee or whatever, but people remember because a lot of people like crows and ravens, so they see the big yellow and orange booth with the crows, and they're like, I like crows, I like yellow. Now I'll remember this booth, and then I see them 4 years later, and they still remember buying the first mystery bag that I ever sold and stuff,
Yeah, yeah.
which like continuously surprises me. I'm like, was it really that big for you? But for some people, what you're doing has a outsized impact compared to how it feels for you.
Yeah, definitely. That's a fun story. Okay, a couple last minute questions here about, during the convention. We have one question again from Glenn saying, do you sell other related merchandise? Here, Glenn specifically calls out dice, which, you said yes to. But I'd be curious kind of your perspective on just, should there be like a theme to the stuff you're selling, or can it really be anything and everything under the sun TTRPG related? How do you kind of draw the line of, oh, I'm just here to sell my five Zines and that's it? Or do you add in some other stuff, and what other stuff should you consider?
Yeah, so I think that there isn't a hard rule on any of this stuff. I would stick to things you think you can do well, is one way I'd put it. Don't just sell dice because you think that it's a cash grab. And if you do, like make sure that you are at least making it worth it in your eyes. Like for me, I said earlier, I'm not a dice goblin type of person, but dice were how I started this business. And you'll see on a lot of my like bios and stuff, it'll say, I sell dice so that I can make games. It's not that I want a dice business, I want a games business, and dice are a means to get there. And because of that, it's actually for a lot of people who are used to, the person at the dice booth is a dice person. It's kind of a novel experience for them. But that being said, I would not try to branch into a bunch of different tabletop accessories like initiative trackers that I have nothing to do with. I figured out the dice thing because I was like, I actually think I made a cool product. I'm going to continue this. But anything that doesn't work or people are don't think that related, it'll often confuse people. And I'll get into this in a minute, but there's kind of 3 types of shoppers at conventions that I find. And 2 out of 3 of them need to get an understanding of your booth before they approach it. So if you don't have a clear booth like pitch, then they might just move past it because it's not clear what they would get out of it. If I see people selling everything under the sun, often the jack of all trades, master of none phrase comes to mind a little bit. If you're selling everything, then I don't think there's one thing that is especially great in that pile. It seems like you put your time into getting as much as possible. That being said, there are booths that sell thousands of different things and do perfectly fine. So you can break every rule that I give you, and there will be some way that it succeeds. But yeah, I would as much as possible try to make things that combine together, because people will often buy several things at once. And if you're selling things that have nothing to do with each other, then why would they get all 3 of these completely unrelated items? Versus for me, it's like, okay, I'm buying a dice bag and a jar of dice and a dice tray. That all makes sense together. That's all one package.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. And I think that this kind of, you talked very briefly about it, is that people kind of like to understand the intention of the booth before they approach it. If they approach you at all. I think that that's kind of an important part here too. I'd love to maybe take a second of your time, Clay, to talk a little bit about the importance of body language, the importance of being animated, while also leaving space for people who are approaching the booth. To talk a little bit about the like social element of being in charge of a booth and selling your wares to people. I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts on what works well.
Yeah, so I would say, first off, there are a billion different ways that you can be a salesperson, which is what you're doing when you're at a booth. There is not one correct way. I am a yapper. I am saying hi to everyone that walks by. That you don't have to do that. Some people, that sounds exhausting, and you're going to burn yourself out day 1 of the 3-day convention. Don't do that if that's going to happen to you. However, if you ignore every single person on the other end of things, that's also going to go pretty poorly for you. So you have to be able to put yourself out there a little bit. At the end of the day, this is a public job that you are doing that requires, with a capital R, conversating with people. Even if that's just to make the sale, you're not going to have the big iPad and they just put what they want in and you silently give it to them. That's going to be weird for them. Mm-hmm. At the very least, say hi or wave at people that come up to you. And you're going to start to get a feel for this kind of concept that I have of range bands in conventions, which I know is a kind of a gaming term. So I'll explain what I mean. And I think this is probably one of the most valuable things that I have to share. So the range bands, I'll put it in the terms of there are grapplers, fencers, and snipers as the 3 types of shoppers. Grappler, it's a yapper. That's the person who they come up to the person at the booth. They're going to talk to you. They're going to ask how you're doing. They'll ask what the booth is, or are you the artist of these prints? They want to meet the person and then decide if they want to buy from this person. I do really well with that type of person because I am that type of person. I sometimes I'll go up to a booth and they're just kind of talking to their buddy and don't interact with me. I'm like, I don't really want to buy from you then because you don't care that much. It may not be the case. I'm making assumptions there, but that's what you're contending with. You're contending with people walking around with a lot of assumptions. So that's the grappler. The next is the fencer. That's someone who approaches the table, not the person at the table. So they may not be hiding from you. They may still say hello and stuff, but generally they are there to look at your stuff. And then they will approach you if they have questions or if they are asking clarification on a deal or anything like that. And then once they want to make the purchase, they are fine to talk to. You don't want to yap so much that they can't focus on what you have to sell, because they'll finish the conversation, go, the conversation's done, cool, and then start moving on, and maybe even forget that they wanted to buy something. Then the furthest along is the sniper. Now, this is someone who they want to stand like 10 feet back from your booth and scope out everything you have, and they don't want to interact. And generally what I do, because I am a yapper, is I will set up my booth where there is at least one spot where you can see what I have to sell and I can't see you. And that doesn't mean that you're like, sneaking through my booth. It's just like, I have one shelf here. So if you stand right in this one spot, you can look at all my stuff and you can be guaranteed that I'm not trying to talk to you. And it seems kind of silly, but it allows them to signal to me that they want to be left alone, which is important because I want to leave them alone if that's what they desire. And even though these interactions can be weird sometimes, if you're like, hey, hello, and they don't respond, it's fine. These people are often whales. This is where like half the whales hide, is in the sniper tier, because they are going to look, and they may literally look for 15 minutes without saying anything, walk up to you and go, I want this and this and this and this, and they just have their list made that they took that 15 minutes to make. Let them make that list. You do not want to turn these people away.
That's really good advice. And I like how you have them all in like their own branded categories. I love that. And I think it's important for people to remember that, exactly, not every person is going to kind of engage with you and your content that you're trying to sell the same way. So I really like that, those distinctions. If you're able to sort of make that distinction before, spending too much time interacting with them, it'll be better off for your booth and for your sales. I think it might take some practice, I'm sure, for people listening to kind of develop that sense on their own.
Oh yeah. I turned away. A lot of these snipers had weird looks as they left my booth early on into this. It was something I had to learn, because I'm like, we're in a public place, we all want to talk to people, it's fun. But conventions are also a place where a lot of underserved, underrepresented communities or people with disabilities and stuff show up. So, it needs to be welcoming for people kind of on all parts of life. I don't know the word that I'm looking for, but you want it to be accessible to everyone.
Yeah, exactly. Make it accessible, make it an enjoyable experience for people of all walks of life and all shopping preferences, I suppose we could say.
Yeah, and I'll also add on to it real quick, just last little functional advice regarding that. The rule that I gave earlier of having 3 things to start ties into these 3 archetypes. I think that if you have 3 items, the best kind of path here is you should have 1 item that can be easily intuited. That for me is jars of dice. No one who's played tabletops will look at it and not understand what's happening. It is a jar full of cool dice. You can intuit it. You should have 1 thing that you have to investigate. So you may need to read the sign to figure out what it is, but you can figure it out on your own. And then the 3rd thing is something you have to inquire about. So it's 3 eyes. The inquire for me is the gachapon machine that says, ask me about 1 free press, ask me about a free D20. That is the grappler yapper type. They're going to go, oh, cool, here's permission and a prompt. So if you have those 3 types, then the 3 archetypes kind of gravitate towards them. And it also, for anyone outside of these archetypes, it kind of graduates them up to talking to you.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's very clever. I'm looking at the time. We have about 15 minutes left before the end of the show. And we do have, I believe, 1 or 2 questions that were asked in the chat. So we're going to quickly zoom through our last pillar here. And this is about things to consider after the con is over. And this question here is from Swift Coyote. Swift Coyote asked us, what did having a table at a convention enable for your project or business that you couldn't get in another way? And I think that this is a really interesting question that you might be able to take in a lot of different directions, Clay. But I'd be curious to hear, for you and for your business, what has being a vendor at a convention enabled you to do?
Yeah, that is actually a very good question. I haven't been asked that in that way before. And I think there's a lot. For me personally, that was actually how I started my business. Was I was already helping at these small conventions, and I went, I think I can do this. And, I'm asking people about D&D because that's what I want to talk about. And they're all saying, yeah, I want to play. I want to play. So it's like, all right, well, I'll make it easy for you guys. So it's a great entry point because it's the most kind of like simplistic human. You show up somewhere and you say, do you want to buy this? So it's a very simple entry point thing. I personally am not very good with social media. I'm not the best with marketing. I can't keep up with that stuff. And what these small conventions do is essentially give you that natural traffic. If you can't get someone onto your website, they're going to be at this convention. So if you put your stuff in front of them, they will be there. It gives you an audience or a consumer base at these specified points that can kind of enable you to grow into other forms of selling. I think another thing is the matter of burnout is very real in this type of thing. I'll say it. Conventions are one of my favorite parts of my job, and it's also one of the hardest by far, especially big conventions. They're very difficult, but I always feel better after than before, at least emotionally, because I'm meeting all these people their lives are being made at least a tiny bit better because of my business. Whether it's that they had, 5 seconds of laughing when their friend got the cursed dice, or I, set up a game for them to play and they got to play with their mom for the first time in a tabletop. There's all sorts of things. It's just, you can't discount being in person with people and seeing the impact you have. Getting that real impact back of what your work does, it really kind of fills you back up from all that you have to pour into your job there. And again, like I've said, I've had people who bought something from me 3 years prior and I hadn't seen them since then. And they immediately recognize me and say, yeah, this was what we talked about last time and all this stuff, which, for you're seeing hundreds of people every day at these conventions. You might not remember it, but it's really cool to see that does happen. Or if you see, your product tied around someone's waistband or all sorts of things like that. And on top of that, as I talked about earlier, I got somewhere around 850 signups for our Kickstarter in person through these tiny little giveaways. The ability to hold someone's attention is much stronger and lasts much longer in person compared to online, especially if you're not on a call with them or something. Being able to have someone ask you a question and you can just talk directly to them for as long as they're willing to stay is a very powerful way to pitch whatever you're pitching.
Yeah, definitely. It's kind of a refreshing way to have that audience too, especially for a lot of us, who are going through social media trying to get traction that way. It feels like being there in person is the way it was meant to be all along.
Yeah, and on top of that, this is where you make connections. And that can be viewed very coldly as you're networking, but also like I've made a lot of really great friends at conventions. And I've met friends who my Kickstarter would not be running very well if I hadn't met them. They, people who will tell you this is where I got my printing done. You should check them out. Or this is a channel that I advertised on that worked really well. Let me introduce them to you. That sort of thing. You'll meet other creators and get to help each other out. I've met people at other booths who are artists and we're like, we want to hire you to make some art for our book. And they're like, yeah, that sounds awesome. Let me come to your booth and look at the stuff that already exists for your book. So yeah, meeting people that are kind of part of your like community in the sense of they follow what you do is good, but also meeting your community of peers is arguably more important because they, within their minds, contains all the information possible about how to do this job. So the more you meet and connect with these people, the more you gain that information.
Yeah, definitely. There's added benefits, right? Totally. All right, so I'm gonna go look at the questions that we have posted in the thread. So we have a question here from the Darker LARPer from Dan. Dan asks, how much should one invest into the setup of it all? Would love to hear more about balance in investment of something you might need to fix/change in the future, especially since you basically get nothing. So Dan is asking about this, how much should you put into the investment up front, things like banners and setup and the gotcha machine and stuff like that.
Yeah, so for me, I was in a position where for a brief period of my life, I was being overpaid to do a remote job where I could afford to kind of front the cost of a banner and a little tent and that sort of thing, or like the canopy because it was an outdoor thing, which, you can easily get the bare minimum nice looking booth materials for under $150, which for a lot of people is still a lot of money. and is not required. My first time selling jars, I literally took like the like indented insert of a car's like trunk and flipped it upside down, and it had this like decent kind of carpety texture, and put the dice on that, which paid zero for. It was literally like my friend was throwing it away when he was going to sell his car or something, and that was what I used as my first shelf. And I got a $40 plastic table off of Walmart.com and that sort of thing. Like, you can go very cheap. It's not going to make or break you. But that being said, I'm of the opinion that you should not, unless you have this crazy kind of spur of the moment thing that is time sensitive. I don't think that you should splurge on like one big gambit to make a convention happen. You should save up in the background, do normal 9 to 5 if you have that, or whatever means you have already making money, and kind of slowly build up until the conventions you're going to are actually paying for themselves. Then you can start investing the money you're making at conventions and profiting back into the next convention. And that's when it starts to snowball. But you shouldn't try to start that snowball when you're like not even at the snow yet, because then it's just gonna kind of melt on the ground. And you don't want to be broke when, if you just waited 2 more months, you would have been able to slowly kind of introduce yourself to these conventions.
Yeah, no, I think that's really sage advice to kind of reinvest slowly into these purchases that will make the booth bigger and better over time. And I think if you're starting as a creator selling at some of these smaller spaces where maybe you're sharing a small table, or it's a local kind of craft fair type of thing, you might be able to kind of pull off having almost absolutely nothing with you other than the products you're selling, right? And it's a good way to start, get a sense of if you like doing it, if this is going to be successful for you, and kind of go from there. So that was the only question we had actually from the community live tonight. But I'm looking at the clock and we're basically at the end. So Clay, I'll start by thanking you. This has been a fantastic discussion. Lots of nuggets of gold in the answers that you gave me tonight. Before we say our goodbyes, I wanted to pass the microphone back over to you to do two things. The first, any parting words that you might have regarding going to a convention, being a vendor, you can at an artist alley or whatnot. This would be your time to kind of give out that last parting piece of wisdom. And then, of course, when you're done doing that, please let us know where people can come and buy your content, or dice or games or whatnot, or follow you on socials and all of that good stuff as well.
Sounds good. Yeah. For everyone who's made it all the way through, thanks for listening to me yap for a while. I would have definitely upsold you on a couple of dice bags by this time if we were at a convention. Honestly, if you take away anything other than that range band thing, which I think is pretty good advice, these conventions exist for people to have fun buying stuff. At the end of the day, that's the gist of what a convention is a place where people are going to have fun shopping. So if you manage to get a booth there, you are going to run into primarily people who want to have fun shopping at your booth. They're essentially on your side here. They want to buy stuff and to have it be a good experience. You want them to buy stuff and have it be a good experience. On top of that, 99.9% of other vendors that I've met are all on the same team as you. You all want each other to do better. You can do trades with people. I'm at a leatherworking booth that gives me a dice tray and I give them dice, all sorts of stuff. It's a community of itself being a vendor. And it's a lot of fun. It is hard work, but it is a lot of fun and it's worth it. And you never know what convention is going to be the one where it clicks for you. So just get out there and try it. At worst, you go to a convention, you lose $30 because the table cost was $40 and you sold one thing. And then you have a lot of information on what you could do better next time, and you've probably made a friend or two. So really just try it out. Then as far as me, as you know, I'm Clay. I am a mod in this community here. I run Kenku Court, which is my dice business. And I am also half of the new publishing team, Nat2 Press. We are just about to start off our Kickstarter for our first 5e adventure book. It's called Rainforest Odyssey. It is a book where you play as a bunch of frogs who live on a mountain where the sun never sets. And then you find out that the moon was killed hundreds of years ago, and you need to go below the fog surrounding the mountain and find it. It is a world that you must make mushroom sandwiches to save. If you want to know more about it, go to play.rainforestodyssey.com. I will link it in whatever channels we have here soon. It's a lot of fun. Any support emails. I know I'm not giving you any free dice right now, but there's some goodies in there. If you can sign up, really appreciate it. And if not, thanks for listening. Feel free to hit me up if you have questions or need more advice running your first convention table. And I wish you the best luck.
Yeah, awesome, Clay. So I definitely want to echo what Clay is saying, and I encourage everybody listening, whether that be live here tonight or in the future in podcast land or YouTube land, to go take a look at Kenku Court and at Clay's Kickstarter. We'll have it linked up probably in the description of the episode. I'd encourage folks to go take a look there. And yeah, and while you're at it and you're doing all of that, please don't hesitate to also follow us on your social media platform of choice. That's at TTRPG Rising Tide, wherever you do your social fix, Blue Sky, Threads. Our next RT Talks will be in about a month's time. We haven't quite landed on a topic or a date yet, so stay tuned. But there will be a chat coming up shortly, and they're always ever insightful and interesting, just like this one. So hope to see you there. I've been Matt, roll_play_chat on all socials, and thank you, Clay, for being here to impart your wisdom on us.
Thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, yeah. So bye everybody, and remember, a rising tide lifts all boats.